In July 1945, the United States successfully tested its first atomic bomb. The test, codenamed Trinity, took place in the deserts of New Mexico as part of the top-secret Manhattan Project. Just a week later, President Harry S. Truman met his wartime ally, Soviet leader Joseph Stalin, in Potsdam, Germany. Truman, speaking casually, hinted that America had developed a weapon of unprecedented destructive power. He braced himself for Stalin's reaction, expecting curiosity or alarm. But to his surprise, Stalin showed almost no interest. Years later, declassified Soviet intelligence files revealed why. Since 1941, Stalin had already been fully informed about the Manhattan Project, thanks to a vast Soviet spy network operating inside the United States and Britain. In fact, Truman himself, who had become president only a few months earlier, knew far less about the Manhattan Project than Stalin did. So when the Soviet Union successfully detonated its own atomic bomb in 1949, it stunned the Western world. The CIA had estimated that the Soviets wouldn't achieve nuclear capability before 1953. How did this happen? Did the Soviet Union really infiltrate one of the most secret projects in American history? How did they build their own bomb so fast? And what role did their spies play? After World War I and before World War II, the race for military and technological supremacy intensified. Nuclear science became the new frontier of power. In 1938, German scientists achieved nuclear fission, the key process behind an atomic bomb. Soon after, other major nations accelerated their nuclear research programs, including the Soviet Union. When World War II began, the Soviet Academy of Sciences formed a special committee to explore the potential military use of atomic energy. That became the foundation of the Soviet nuclear program. Meanwhile, in 1942, President Franklin D. Roosevelt authorized the Manhattan Project, a massive American effort to develop an atomic weapon before Nazi Germany could. Germany ultimately failed to build a bomb, but the United States succeeded. When Hiroshima and Nagasaki were destroyed in August 1945, the atomic bomb became more than just a weapon. It became a symbol of technological mastery, national pride, and global dominance. By the end of World War II, two superpowers had emerged, the United States and the Soviet Union. Though wartime allies, their ideologies were worlds apart. The U.S. championed democracy and capitalism, while the Soviet Union promoted communism. The Cold War that followed was defined by political rivalry, military tension, and an unending struggle for power. One key reason behind this growing tension was America's possession of nuclear weapons, something Stalin was determined to change. Even before the war ended, Soviet scientists had begun experimenting with nuclear fission, but progress was slow. When Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, most scientific resources were diverted to immediate military needs: radar, artillery, and communications. That changed once Soviet intelligence learned about the Manhattan Project. Stalin immediately ordered his security agencies to uncover everything they could about it. Physicist Igor Kurchatov, known today as the father of the Soviet atomic bomb, was appointed head of the program in 1943. Under his leadership, the USSR centralized its efforts, creating a special research laboratory in Moscow known as KB2, which became the heart of Soviet atomic development. Unlike the Manhattan Project, the Soviet effort was smaller in scale. A handful of physicists worked under harsh wartime conditions. But when the US successfully tested and used the atomic bomb in 1945, Stalin moved fast. In August that same year, he placed the NKVD, the Soviet secret police, in charge of the entire program. Over the next 4 years, the Soviet Union poured enormous resources into building a bomb of its own. In 1946, under Kurchatov's supervision, the Soviets built their first nuclear reactor, known as F1, in Obninsk. They used forced labor, prisoners from Soviet gulags, to construct uranium plants and other critical facilities. By December that year, they achieved their first nuclear chain reaction, a key step toward producing plutonium-239, the material needed for a bomb. The first plutonium production reactor went online in June 1948, and within 8 months, the Soviets had their first batch of plutonium ready. The components were assembled in a secret facility near Sarov, about 400 kilometers southeast of Moscow. Finally, on August the 29th, 1949, the Soviet Union detonated its first atomic bomb, codenamed First Lightning. But the secret behind their rapid success wasn't just science. It was espionage. The Soviet Union had built one of the most effective spy networks in modern history. Through deep-cover agents and sympathetic scientists, they managed to infiltrate the Manhattan Project itself, stealing crucial information about bomb design and uranium processing. Theodore Hall, an American physicist, was one of the youngest members of this espionage network. A member of a Marxist student group, he was persuaded by his roommate, Samuel Sachs, to share nuclear secrets with the Soviets. Through Sachs, Hall passed detailed information about the bomb's construction to Moscow. Before his death in 1997, Hall admitted that he feared a world dominated solely by American nuclear power. He believed sharing atomic knowledge with the Soviets would maintain a balance of power and prevent global catastrophe. Then there was Klaus Fuchs, a German-born physicist who fled Nazi Germany, became a British citizen, and later volunteered to spy for the Soviets out of ideological sympathy for communism. Fuchs worked on both the Manhattan Project and Britain's nuclear program, passing along vital blueprints and data. In 1949, the U.S. counterintelligence project known as Venona intercepted Soviet communications. Fuchs was interrogated and soon confessed, leading to his conviction and a 14-year prison sentence. His confession triggered the unraveling of an even bigger Soviet spy ring. Among those exposed was Harry Gold, a chemist from Philadelphia who had been smuggling industrial and atomic secrets to Moscow since 1935. When the FBI discovered a map of the Manhattan Project's location in his home, Gold panicked and confessed, leading investigators to one of the most infamous espionage cases in American history, the Rosenberg spy ring. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, along with Ethel's brother David Greenglass, were accused of passing atomic secrets to the Soviet Union. The case shocked the American public and deepened Cold War paranoia. By the time the Soviet Union tested its bomb in 1949, the balance of power had shifted forever. The nuclear monopoly the United States once held was gone, and a new, more dangerous chapter of the Cold War had begun. But behind the headlines of 1949, another question lingered. Could this have been prevented? From the final months of World War II until the late 1940s, American policymakers, generals, and scientists debated one haunting possibility. Could the U.S. stop the Soviets from getting the bomb? And if it could, should it? In the immediate aftermath of the war, Washington tried to use its nuclear monopoly as diplomatic leverage. This approach, later called atomic diplomacy, aimed to pressure Moscow into making political and territorial concessions. The most formal effort came in 1946 with the Baruch Plan, a proposal at the United Nations that called for international control over all atomic energy. The United States even offered to dismantle its own bombs, but only after a global authority was established to monitor nuclear activity everywhere. To Soviet leaders, it looked like a trap, a way for America to lock in its nuclear dominance under the guise of disarmament. Deeply distrustful of Western intentions, Moscow rejected the plan, killing the last real chance for post-war cooperation. But Washington didn't stop there. During the final stages of World War II, General Leslie Groves, head of the Manhattan Project, had ordered the bombing of a German uranium plant in Oranienburg to keep its materials from falling into Soviet hands. Though the Soviets still managed to recover some uranium, it showed that the U.S. was willing to take direct action to slow their progress. After 1945, however, as Soviet scientists moved their research deep inside the USSR, direct sabotage became nearly impossible. That left one final chilling option: a preemptive strike. Between 1945 and 1949, the U.S. military drafted several war plans, codenamed Operation Totality, Operation Broiler, and Operation Half Moon, envisioning the use of America's limited atomic stockpile to destroy Soviet industrial centers and command hubs. By 1949, one plan, Operation Trojan, even proposed dropping over 100 nuclear bombs on 70 Soviet cities. The logic was simple but brutal. Strike before the USSR had its own bomb and end the threat forever. But President Truman and his advisors rejected the idea. The reasons were both practical and moral. The US had only a small number of operational atomic bombs, nowhere near enough to guarantee victory. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union had overwhelming conventional military power in Europe, and any American strike could trigger a devastating invasion of the continent. The American public, weary from years of war and horrified by Hiroshima and Nagasaki, had no appetite for another conflict, especially one that could wipe out entire populations. And Truman understood that launching a first nuclear strike would destroy America's moral standing, just as it was emerging as the leader of the free world. So the United States stepped back. By the time the Soviets detonated their first bomb in 1949, the test they called First Lightning, the brief window to stop a nuclear-armed USSR had closed forever. From that moment on, the world entered a new and dangerous era, the nuclear arms race, where both superpowers lived under one chilling reality: mutual assured destruction. The Soviet test of 1949 didn't just mark the birth of another bomb. It marked the birth of a world living on edge, where peace depended not on trust, but on the fear of annihilation. From that moment, every diplomatic move, every military buildup, and every standoff, from Berlin to Cuba, carried the shadow of nuclear fire. But here's a question to ponder. If the United States had acted preemptively to stop the Soviets, would the world be safer today? Or would that strike have unleashed an even darker age? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into Cold War history, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more, and share it with others who love uncovering the hidden stories behind world events.